Good morning. Welcome to the Science Mind class here at CSLDallas. I'm Dr. Petra Weldis, and we are so grateful to Dr. Tracy Brown for last week. Super grateful for her doing the class and our Sunday celebration, and as we were leading our tour to Costa Rica. And it was a lot warmer in Costa Rica than it is here in Dallas. Although it's going to warm up, I know that. So I'm going to enjoy the 70 degrees, and then it's going to go back down again. Ooh, we're in the middle of winter. All right, so we are in the section on subjective intelligence. And I have a lovely note here from Tracy, which I think is super helpful in recognizing how difficult it can be to have these conversations. Inevitably, when we have these conversations about the nature of reality from the more absolute point of view, we really struggle in not using ourselves as the metaphor or ourselves as the touchstone to try to understand what we mean. And the challenge with that is when we do that, we're doing exactly what humanity has done for thousands and thousands of years, which is to make the infinite in our own image. And it is really challenging, especially today in our culture, here in the US and in a lot of places. We have become so what shall I say? We have learned so much about human development and about psychology, and we have done a lot of great work by learning about our own psychology, about learning about how to understand what's going on with us, right? These are huge leaps forward in understanding mental health and all of these things. The challenge is that we continue to use our understanding of ourselves to try to get a hold of what's going on in this infinite reality that is not yet taken form. So we talk about it as the transcendent. We talk about it as the ultimate infinite reality. In traditional religion, it's called God. In the East, it's Brahman. And in the native traditions, it's Great Spirit, or something that is not yet formed. And so we really have to look for other metaphors, other ways of understanding it, rather than projecting onto this our infinite reality things that we understand about ourselves. And so this is why in metaphysics, in New Thought, this is why we seek to describe it less in human terms and more in terms of nature. Because nature has no psychology. There's no psychology in the soil, or how the tree grows, or how the seed becomes the plant, or how the plant then matures into a flower, why the certain animals are in different situations on the food chain. Right? All of this is life unfolding, and there's no psychology in it. And so I really want to encourage us when we are trying to get a hold of what it is we're talking about in these admittedly philosophical conversations. I mean, this is what we're doing here. We're doing metaphysics. Metaphysics. Understanding the nature of reality beyond the physical. That's what the word metaphysics means, right? It's the name of the book that Aristotle wrote after he wrote the book called Physics. And the book of Physics was everything that they knew at that time in ancient Greece about the physical universe, everything that they thought, everything that all the ways they tried to describe it. And of course, there was this massive controversy. Is everything a bunch of little particles that somehow glom together? And we actually get the word atom from Heraclitus, or Pericles, doesn't matter, one of the pre-Socratic philosophers. We get the word atom, which we still use today, as if it were these little discrete building blocks that, right? Or is it somehow this infinite cause, this infinite reality, this oneness, which is emanating into reality, which is the Platonic line? And these two conversations were happening constantly. So the book Physics is all about the natural world, the physical world. And then metaphysics is trying to grapple with everything that's non-tangible, non-physical, unformed, and how that relates to the physical. So that's where we get the word metaphysics. Every religion, every spirituality has metaphysics in it, because it's talking about that which is not created, not formed. And we, in New Thought and Science of Mind, we make that the causal impulse of life. We understand that the form is merely an effect of that metaphysical reality. So more than doing philosophy, what we're doing is metaphysics. And so to use ourselves as a way of trying to get a hold of what's going on can really take us down a rabbit hole. And we will misunderstand what's being done here. So over and over and over again, when we're talking about this subjective intelligence, when we're talking about this aspect of the one, the unformed substance, the creative medium, the creative process, all of these things, when we're talking about it, it's really helpful, rather than going to ourselves, to go to nature and look for something that'll help us get a hold of what's meant here. Okay, so here we go, in page 91, at the bottom of page 91. While the soul may not choose, having no self-consciousness of its own, yet it has an intelligence which is infinite compared to the intelligence which we exhibit. So if we think about this statement in terms of ourselves, a consciousness that is not self-conscious but is intelligent compared to the intelligence that we exhibit, we may have the tendency to want to go to our intuition, our gut feelings, something that we maybe intuitively sense or know, but we haven't really given it a lot of thought, right? The challenge, of course, is that that's not what this is talking about. That's not even remotely what this is talking about. So if we aren't going to use ourselves, what in nature could we look to help understand what it means to have an intelligence which is infinite but not self-conscious? Doesn't mean it's not conscious, doesn't mean it doesn't have awareness, but it's not self-conscious. Where might we find that intelligence? Well, you've all heard it, probably haven't given it thought about it in this context, but one of the most common ways of thinking about this is the idea of the seed, the individual seed. I don't know how many of you are gardeners. Maybe you've never planted from a seed, but you can do a thought experiment with me. So let's say you and your child made jack-o'-lanterns at Halloween. And you pulled out all that stuff. My son hated it. He refused to put his hand in that slimy thing. It's hysterical. And you carve all that out. And if you're like me, back when I used to live in Seattle, you know, you couldn't throw all those seeds away. You had to roast them because pumpkin seeds roasted are really good. But those individual seeds is what's used then to plant. If you're not buying it down at Lowe's or Home Depot, the little plant, right? Those seeds are what's used. Now, that seed has within it an unself-conscious intelligence that, given the right circumstances, meaning not roasted in the oven, but actually put in the ground, and put in the ground in a climate that is in support of that particular kind of plant growing, that seed knows what to do. It has an innate intelligence in it that knows when to germinate, how to put out little root hairs. It knows that it needs to put the roots out before it puts out the tendrils, before it starts growing. It has an intelligence in it. We use the word know. It knows what to do. And do you see, I bet all of you have immediately gone, well, how do I know what to do? I know, right? And we associate it with our knowing. And this is the mistake. It's not the way that we know something. It's not our intuition. It's not our logical reasoning. It's not any of that. It's the thing that allows your heart to beat. It's the thing that, as your body is growing, it knows how to say, this is going to be a heart cell. This is going to be a brain cell. Do you see, there's no outside force guiding the cells saying, I know what you should be, I know what you should be. And the cell isn't conscious of making a decision, and yet the intelligence is there for it to follow the pattern of a heart or a lung or a tomato plant or a sequoia tree, and there's no confusion. You don't plant a pumpkin seed and get a sequoia or a butterfly, right? I mean, it makes us laugh. It's silly because we can see that there is this intelligence. Well, that's the term that has been used in the times in which the metaphysical New Thought writers were writing in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. They really talked about this intelligence. We might today use the word consciousness. There is a consciousness in that seed, and it draws to it what it needs, and it takes from the soil what it needs, and it grows into a plant, barring interference either from a deer that nibbles it off, or from us that have depleted the soil or, messed with the climate or things like that. So non-self-conscious but intelligent. And so because this is how we want to break apart this idea where, when we were talking about the part of this infinite reality that we talked about, spirit, right? The impulse, the love, the desire to express, it's a little easier to feel that inner push that we ourselves have, which is life itself. But we don't actually have to be self-conscious even to experience that inner push. It is actually the push that causes the seed to awaken, to germinate. But then what it does is actually the automatic outcome, the automatic outpicturing of the divine blueprint, the innate intelligence, the wisdom that is within that particular seed. And so this is what we're trying to get a hold of. So this is at the top of page 92, the beginning of the first full paragraph. The same principle holds good in that greater creative medium of the spirit, which we call the soul of the universe. He uses a lot of words to mean a lot of different things, so you just have to kind of roll with it. It has the intelligence and power to produce, but no choice as to what it is to produce. Having no conscious mind of its own, it receives all ideas given to it and tends to create a form around it. So this is super important because it can't reject what is planted. I mean, when I first heard this, and using the analogy of the seed, right, it would be like imagining that you planted a whole row of carrot seeds And as you backed up, the soil spit all those carrot seeds back at you and said, no, don't plant carrots here. What are you doing? Are you crazy? Your carrots aren't going to grow here. This is no good. Don't. Right? The soil is never going to spit the seed back out again. Do you see what I'm saying? It cannot say no. It has no choice but to try to grow whatever has been planted. Now, if you're, up north, where they're now have just had massive snow, and right before it snowed, you planted petunias, right? Uh-oh is right. It's not going to survive, not because there's anything wrong with the plant, but because the intelligence of the plant, it has been placed in the wrong place. But the soil doesn't reject it. Do you see what I'm saying? And so when we talk about the soul of the universe, it's an aspect of this infinite reality that has no individual choice. It has no ability to choose to reject what has been given to it. It can only produce. Having no conscious mind of its own, it receives the ideas given to it and tends to create a form around it. If it could choose, it could reject. And this is as impossible as the soil saying, no, you can't plant this here. Right? Wouldn't we like it? Wouldn't it be great if the soil would say, wait, I'm depleted. Don't plant me yet until you've given me some food. Or what are you, crazy? Did you buy that thing at Home Depot? Don't you know that's supposed to grow in tropics? Right? All the things that aren't zoned for Dallas, and yet they sell them. They sell them at Home Depot and Lowe's and nurseries and whatever, right? They're not native plants, and they don't do as well, because the native intelligence of the whole system understands that left to their own devices, it will naturally grow in the places that support it. That's the kind of intelligence that we're talking about. So that whole rest of the paragraph, right? He really is using this natural metaphor, this metaphor of nature. When we are talking about the infinite reality, especially this aspect of the infinite reality, it is so much easier to get a hold of it if we will go to the metaphors about nature than to our own individual psyche. Because when we go to ourselves, we are only going to confuse the issue. We're going to stop there. The last thing I'll say is this word soul packs in a whole boatload of aspects of the infinite are packed into this one idea. And so we're going to be unpacking it all, this whole chapter. And the most important part of this is that while it's intelligent and can produce anything, it does so automatically. It does not choose to produce or not to produce. This is one of the most critical aspects of everything we're going to talk about, whether we talk about the law, the creative process, the creative medium, the subjective mind. There are all kind of different ways of getting a hold of this part of the infinite. And it has nothing to do with our own psychology. All right, so, we're going to turn to Ryan. We're going to say good morning.
Well, good morning, Dr. Petra, and welcome back. We're glad to have you back.
Thanks.
And good morning to everybody here in the room that's joining us on campus. And good morning to all the folks that are joining us all over the internet. So it's so glad that you're here to join us in conversation about intelligent dirt today. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on this. So for the folks that are here in the room, you can go ahead and raise your hands to the ones I'm waving at right now. You will be on camera. Thank you for waving back, Willie. I see you. And for the folks that I'm waving to on this side, you won't be on camera, so just heads up. And for the folks who are joining us via Zoom, you can hit the raise your hand icon and we can pull you into the room. Or feel free to use the chat feature and I can bring that question into the room. And for all the folks joining us all over the globe on Facebook, we love and appreciate that you're in community with us today. Feel free to put your chat inside of, or your question or comment inside of the chat, my apologies, and I can bring those into the room as well. So I see we have someone here in the room first, so we'll go to you, and then if we have anybody online, I can present that as well. Please say your name and ask your question.
Yeah, my name is Francisco Sierra. I had two questions, if that's okay.
Oh, absolutely.
So the first question is a bit historical. Why is it that back in the late 19th century, early 20th century, the word intelligence was used to designate that consciousness or spirit that is pervading everything, and now we use the word consciousness? And the other question...
Well, hang on.
Yes.
Let's start with that.
Yeah.
I don't know that I know the answer to that. I'm thinking it's just the evolution of language, right? And, you know, if you do, so you have to remember that metaphysicians and these people who were writing, they were engaging in a 5,000-year-old philosophical conversation. And so the difference between intelligence and instinct, the difference between what does it mean to be a human being as opposed to an animal, right? Well, these were all things that the philosophers have spent thousands of years exploring and talking about. And of course, we live in the East, in the West, we live in a Judeo-Christian culture, which makes primary duality. And so I just think it's the language that they had out of this stream of conversation, intellectual conversation, philosophical conversation, religious conversation. And somehow, I would say that in the late 1800s, what we saw was the influx of the impact of the Eastern traditions, right? The first Parliament of the World Religions, 1893. Krishnamurti gave this huge a talk and like broke open. We were starting to have imports from the East in the 1800s, and that's just a whole different mindset in that, and I think that began to bring this idea of consciousness forward as opposed to self-consciousness. Right up until that point, I think in the West we primarily had self-consciousness. So I'm making all of this up. I'm talking just out of what I know at the moment. I think it's really just the evolution of the language and the broadening of the understanding.
Thank you. That's a really good way for me to start and
Thinking about it, yeah, exploring it yourself.
Yes. The other question is, I know you were talking about how there is no psychology in nature itself. When you're talking about the ground, knowing which seeds to take and which ones not. Would you say though that our psychology, even though it's different, might be in some sense continuous with the operating consciousness, or do you think it's totally separate?
Oh, no, I don't think it's totally separate. But first of all, let me say the soil does never say, I'll take these seeds and not those, ever. It only takes the seeds. It can't say no, can't not take seeds, right? And then there's a desire, which is the infinite life, which is spirit, a desire for that seed to try to grow, even if it's planted in the wrong space. No, and we're going to get to all of that. We're going to talk about the human being. We're going to talk about where we fit in all of this and who we are. But we always want to leap to that because, well, really, what's more important than ourselves? Right? What does this mean about us? Well, let's start with what does it mean, and then we'll think about what does it mean about us. Because clearly we understand that we're made in the image and likeness of that infinite reality. It's not made in our image and likeness. And if we truly grapple with that, we will actually understand our psychology differently. So yeah. So it's so interesting that you asked this question this morning, Francesco, because I was really thinking about this statement, we're spiritual beings having a human experience, right? And the awakening of consciousness is the revelation that consciousness is not biologically confined. And so much of our psychology is actually the result of the awareness of our biological imperatives, right? It's the awareness of what happens with our reptilian brain when it goes into fight, flight, or freeze. It's the awareness of what happens with our limbic system when we start to manage our fight, flight, or freeze. When we recognize what we need to do, we do all of that psychological work, and 90% of it is in relationship to the way memories and traumas and beliefs have been embodied. And it's both the result of and the embodiment of a set of ways of believing about life and experiencing life. And it is in many ways biologically driven. But we're spiritual beings having a human experience, right? Which means that we are the universal waking up as individuals. So there is an aspect of us that is not biologically driven.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Not separate, just another way of thinking about ourselves, right? And it's a different starting point. And if we start in a different place, the whole construct is different, right? And so we're going to talk about all that. I promise you we're going to get to that. But I'm really wanting to force you out of thinking about it with a human being at the center. Because, we're not, right? I mean, I hate to break it to you, but we're not in charge of the universe. And so that's oh no. So that's a great question, and we will get to it. All right, Ryan, I'm going to turn back to you.
Yeah, I just want to poll the audience here. I did want to say this cool quote that came through. The Greek word for entelechy, I think is how I'm
right. That's right.
Refers to the potential for becoming fully realized. The entelechy of an acorn to be an oak tree. The entelechy of the baby to be grown-up human being. So I just thought that was a really fascinating thing, that this is ancient.
And it's a completely different understanding than we have today of the word intelligence. Right? We think of the word intelligence like IQ, like how intelligent are you? And so that it. See, do you see that's the philosophical line that's being followed? And so that's the language that and all of these people they all had a classic liberal arts education. They were way more educated than we are. And they read all these books and they read all this stuff. Whether they wanted to or not, they had to read all this stuff. And so that was the language that they started with. So thank you to whoever put that quote in. And Brian, I'm going to ask you to capture that and send that to me, because that's the piece I was making up. That's the piece right there. Thank you very much.
Words mean a lot, and especially if we go back to the Gnostic era, I mean, a lot of what we're talking about today isn't new. It's been processed over humanity for several thousands of generations.
Right.
And so we're here as a product of that, and we're just trying to, now take today's slang and add it to our own
Right.
body of knowledge.
Right.
I do see Marjorie here with her
Great.
hand raised online, so I'm going to ask her to unmute herself and join us.
Good morning, Marjorie.
Good morning. Yes, I learned that word entelechy from Jean Houston.
Yes.
And it's always has meant so much to me. And I think that she was possibly, I believe I heard her speak about this, where she was taking this part of the textbook from Ernest Holmes and relating the notion that human beings are indeed nature. We are not separate from nature. We are actually nature. And so from that perspective, you can sort of follow that line, and it sort of, mixes together. It kind of works.
Yes.
But I know from this discussion, and I'm not trying to change this discussion, so I will go with your notion of separating the biology, because I do think that it will eventually come full circle.
Of
I
course.
think we'll come back to, So, but
Right.
I've always loved the way she spoke about the word entelechy.
Beautiful. Thanks, Marjorie. Yes, of course, over and over and over and over and over again, we have to remember that we are separating things out so that we can focus on a piece of it, but we are not saying it's separate. But without being able to separate it out, like we could never, if we only talk about H2O, we can never talk about ice, right? But we have to talk about H2O in the form of ice, so we can talk about crystallization, and we can talk about what temperature it needs to, have to be at, how deep does it have to be before we can walk on it. I mean, all these kinds of things. We actually have to separate H2O into ice so that we can talk about it. And we talk about it as ice, never forgetting that it's also liquid and it's also gaseous. But we can't talk about its crystalline structure unless we're talking about ice. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's still all H2O. So we constantly have to remember this. All we're doing is helping to bring some things out, and so that we can explore them, discover them, and finally we have to use them. We have to prove to ourselves that there's value in understanding. And I love that you brought up Jean Houston, Marjorie. For those of you who have not ever read it, in the definitive edition of the 1938 version of The Science of Mind that we use in all of our classes and everywhere else, don't be fooled by getting some fake version of The Science of Mind. It's just people using the 1926 version that's open copyright now. Always look for the one with the foreword by Jean Houston. If it has the foreword by Jean Houston, you have the right version. And so often you can, if you're struggling finding the right one, just Google Science of Mind by Ernest Holmes, foreword by Jean Houston. And you will inevitably get the right version of the book that we use. And we try to standardize, right? So we're all on the same page and we're all able to follow together. Not like it's magic that it's the, And her foreword is brilliant. If you've never read it, please do yourself a favor and read it. It is extraordinary. She is an extraordinary human being. I've had the pleasure of hearing her speak many times. She's just really amazing. And what she talks about in terms of us really taking up and living the science of mind is very inspiring. So, Brian, anything else going on out there? Any other cool quotes to read us?
Well, not that I'm seeing, unless anybody here in the audience has a question. But I did notice we went from intelligent dirt to intelligent ice. And so if there isn't any further questions, maybe we go a little bit further in.
Great. All right. And so what is this intelligence, right, that we're talking about? And how does this intelligence work? So the next subchapter is law. Law, universal law. So it must be apparent by now that the creative medium of spirit is the great mental law of the universe. It is the law obeying the will of spirit. It is the universal law of mind. There's so many words that we use for this law. Fundamentally, ultimately, it is the law of cause and effect. Oh gosh, he just starts going off and on and on and on. We're going to skip over a few of these sentences because we are going to get to them later. Being subjective, it cannot analyze, dissect, or deny. It's a universal law. It cannot analyze, dissect, or deny. Because of its nature, it must always accept. The karmic law, which means the law of cause and effect, works through the medium of the universal soul, which is the creative principle or nature, and the law of spirit. Ooh, man, just totally so many words in there. So the thing to think about is not human laws. Okay, we are not talking about human laws. We already know that the justice system is flawed. We already know that the laws are man-made. We already know that not only are they designed to separate us, they are also poorly applied. So again, the most critical thing in this conversation is not to equate the word law with the human laws. I don't care whether it's the law of you need to stop at a stop sign or laws that cause you to, be thrown into jail or any, it's not about human laws. So where else are there laws? This is not a rhetorical question. Where else are there laws? Nature, science, math, right? There are laws that can be discovered and used. And they do not analyze, dissect, or deny. And so, what are we doing when we're learning how to build and fly a space rocket? We're dealing with laws. The law of gravity, the law of aerodynamics, the law of the kind of fuel that's being used, how that works, the law of, well, I guess it would be the law of gravity, the law of inertia. And when it doesn't work and something terrible happens, was it God's fault? No. Did God will it to happen? No. The laws were inappropriately applied. There was a mistake made somewhere along the line of the application of the law. But the law does not dissect, analyze, or deny. The law does not say, wait, you have too much of this and that in the fuel, it's going to explode. No, you learn that it's going to explode by it exploding, right? That's how you learn. That you have incorrectly applied the law. Do you see? This is critical. When you make a mathematical error, there is no judgment. There's no punishment other than you got the wrong answer. So what do? You go back and you try to refigure it. You try to remember how do you apply all the mathematical, do you remember that in algebra? Oh my God, it made me crazy, right? Inside the brackets, before outside the brackets, and you always multiply and divide before you add or some such thing or whatever. Don't quote me on any of this because that was a long time ago, right? And there's a set of rules. If you're going to do an algebraic equation, right, there's a set of rules, what things you do first. Otherwise, it's just this string of ridiculousness. But if you know the rules, right, if you know the laws of adding and subtracting and you know about what the brackets mean and how they operate, and you actually remember it while you're doing the problem, you will actually get the correct result. Do you see? And there's nothing in that is saying, what are you, stupid? There's nothing in that saying, wait, you're doing it wrong. There's nothing in that says, well, because you did it wrong on this problem, I'm not going to let you get the next problem right because you, by God, are going to learn how to do this. Right? Do you see? We ascribe feelings or will or intentionality to the law. No. It's a universal law. Now, another word that we could use, which maybe is less confusing, is principle, as opposed to a law. A lot of people have trouble separating out, right, human law from universal laws, especially if you have been the subject of the inappropriate application of human laws, right? We've got lots of evidence for that with various groups of people, and so we really have to pull those apart. And so sometimes it can be really helpful. We're actually doing the whole series on in our celebration this month on principles and practices. And so the principles is just another word for the way in which something works. And specifically, this aspect of the infinite, which has no self-consciousness, but we'll use the word entelechy, it operates like a law, like a principle. And if we can get a hold of this, we get a hold of immeasurable power, right? Because it can, in fact, only say yes. And the way in which this law operates, let me say this. When we're talking about the law of cause and effect, we are not giving a prescription. You should pay attention to the cause so you get a different effect. We're not giving a prescription. We are describing the way the nature of reality operates. Effect always follows a cause. Whether or not we are conscious about the causes that we ourselves are participating in, the law is always operating. An effect is always the outcome of a cause. That's all the law of cause and effect is saying. The effect is always the outcome of a cause. Metaphysics is ultimately, as Ernest Holmes says somewhere else in the textbook, the study of first causes. Not only the first cause of the infinite reality, but then the first cause in our own lives. We are going to get to that part. How do we engage with this law of cause and effect? But ultimately, all it is a description, which is basically what any law is. What is the principle of energy that can be neither created nor destroyed? This is not a prescription. It's a description. It's simply a description of how nature, how reality works. That's it. That's all it is. Whether we know it or not, that's how it works. Whether we're using it or not, whether we understand it or not, that is simply a description that energy can never be created or destroyed. We built a fire. I built a fire the other night. I had my granddaughter. We had my granddaughter over, and Karen had to go, and so Ari and I were sitting there in front of the fire, and she was like, "Wow, it's really hot." And she was like, "Well, what's fire?" Oh God. Oh, okay, I'm not sure the greatest minds in the world actually know what fire is. And so, of course, we're big fans of Frozen, so we got to talk about the four elements: earth, air, fire, and water. Oh my God, how do you explain this to an almost 4-year-old? And so I said, well, you see, the wood, heat applied to the wood creates fire. And the wood is turning into the flame and the heat, which is basically energy, cannot be created or destroyed, right? The energy is captured in the wood. That's what this whole thing about carbon is all about, right? And when you burn it, you release that carbon into the atmosphere. And so, it was my first science lesson to an under 4-year-old. But do you see, all I'm doing is describing something. And we take it as a prescription. Well, I have to start, I'm going to turn the law on by setting my intention, by doing an affirmation, by doing a spiritual mind treatment. No. The law is just simply, it's a description. Every effect is a product of a cause. You want a different effect, you got to change the cause. It's really that simple. Well, simple to understand. It can be very, very difficult to do because we're constantly creating causes. But we're going to get to us. We are going to get to us. So when you read this next section, right, and every time it uses the law of mind, the law of the creative process, the law of the creative medium, all those different words, remember that fundamentally it's the law of cause and effect that we're getting a hold of, and see how it unfolds for you. Yes, Ryan.
Dr. Petra, on that note, I wanted to let folks know about the event that you'll be doing on February 15th. I know there's one on Valentine's Day, but February 15th is a good chance to practice this because you're talking about sacred healing.
Yes.
Connecting your mind with your body and then having that heal yourself. So
Yes.
I just wanted to make mention of that for the folks who are joining us online and here in the room. Since it's a hybrid experience, it is based on a love offering, but
Right.
it's going down this.
Yes, and I love that you said that, Ryan, because we do have 4 sacred healing experiences throughout the year. 2 of them will be available hybrid, 2 of them will be in person only. This one is available hybrid. So if you want to participate in a sacred healing experience, and it is fundamentally using these understandings, please do join us on the 15th. Yeah, and we have a vow renewal if you're in person. We have a vow renewal on the 14th, and I have my Bible and New Thought Old Testament class coming up. So if you're not signed up for that, sign up for that, because, ooh man, are we going to dive into some of these things which have gotten pretty convoluted from the time all that was written to today. So lots of cool stuff coming up. All right, well, thank you for joining us. We are going to have a fabulous Sunday celebration. Join us in 30 minutes for that. And otherwise, we will see you soon again. Bye for now.
All right.